Hello and welcome to the Post-Up Show. It's Cyrus. I'm here with Kaunda. Kaunda, how you doing, man?
I'm good, Cyrus. Jay Rogers. How's your week going?
Always good when the NBA action is on, and man, have we had some good NBA action. We've had some really close games. The Pistons, for some reason, are doing stuff. But this week's episode, or rather this particular episode, we're going to be talking about some of the surprises in the NBA right now. And that's actually the teams that are topping both the East and the Western Conference. Kaunda, this is something I know you've got a soft spot for, because it's nice to see change. It's nice to see different teams starting to rise to the top. Whether they stay there or not is another question altogether. But have you been excited to see what's happening in the East? Let's start with the East. Look at that. The Philadelphia 76ers, top of the standings in the East, ahead of the Bucks and the Nets, who are more fancied teams. But I mean, a game and a half ahead of the Bucks is quite a nice gap there. What do you think the Sixers are actually doing right this time?
Cyrus, there's a lot they're doing right. There's been a lot of calls for Joel Embiid, especially as the de facto leader of that squad, to step up. Shaquille O'Neal has called him out numerous times, Cyrus, to say, look, dude, you can be as dominant as I was. You just need to step your game up. A guy your size should be always a walking triple-double or a double-double at least, with points in the high 20s, early 30s even. And I think this season, if you look at Joel's stats, that's exactly what he's trying to maintain. And that is being so dominant and scoring at such a high level that he stays in the MVP conversation, Cyrus.
Yeah.
And I think that has had a big impact on that team. Ben Simmons, I don't know what's happening. I never seem to be happy with the fact that the Ben Simmons we're seeing is the we should be seeing, but that remains to be seen. Maybe Doc Rivers will pull a few tricks here and there and something will come out. Tobias Harris, Cyrus, a great player. I think he was a great pickup, and he's played with Doc Rivers before. But back to Joel Embiid, Cyrus, I think that is the key piece that's working at the Sixers at the moment. He's stepped his game up. I think he's showing a lot of maturity, maybe more on-court action than social media action.
Yeah, that's what we want to see.
Although, he can't leave those socials alone. My man, Joel. but still, Cyrus, I think he's putting more effort on the court. They're producing more so far. I hope they can maintain this. But also, I'm not one to be against rentals. You want to rent that top spot for a while, it's okay with me. Especially if you're a team like the 76ers, which I kind of fancy, and it's got an African talent leading up the squad, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a really good thing to look at, because when you talk about the fact that, like, renting the top spot, I think this could be one that they rent to purchase. Whether or not they make it all the way to the finals this time remains to be seen. But I think I agree with you exactly in terms of Joel Embiid as being the key focus on how and why things have worked so well for them. But they do need more from the likes of Ben Simmons. They do need more from the likes of Tobias Harris. Harris has been good. Seth Curry has been really good for them. I was just reading today that he's actually on course to become the first ever 50-50-100 guy, because he's shooting 50% from field goal range, 50% from 3-point range, and he is 100% from the free throw line through 20-odd games. So it's pretty insane. I think Doc Rivers has been the right kind of fit there, because he knows how to work with Tobias Harris. He's worked with him for a period of time before this, so he knows what he's going to get from him. It's really what he can try and coax out of Ben Simmons, like you said, is going to be the key thing here. But then let's look at the standings again, because yes, they are a game and a half ahead of the Bucks, but this Bucks team is just, they've been up in the standings for years now. Giannis has been doing the right stuff there, and we're seeing some things from this Bucks team that we didn't see before. Stuff like Chris Middleton actually handling the rock and bringing the ball up court, starting off the plays. And that's a really interesting wrinkle, especially when you think of the fact that everybody expects Giannis to have the ball in his hands and him to attack the basket all the time. So it's really interesting to see Coach Bud changing his philosophy a little bit. But do you think that top three will change much in terms of the 76ers, who are top, the Bucks in second, and the Nets in third? Or do you think this might be how they go throughout the rest of the season?
Cyrus, those top three spots, I think they're gonna fluctuate between those three teams. Obviously, from the beginning of the season, I think the Milwaukee Bucks return with a big chip on their shoulders. We finished top of the East, then literally did next to nothing in the postseason. How embarrassing was that? And then we're also in possession of the back-to-back MVP in one Giannis Antetokounmpo. You and I have always spoken about Chris Middleton, Cyrus. He needs to step his game up, and I think he's doing just that. I mean, the amount he gets paid, and I don't want to start counting his dollars, Cyrus. But
everybody be counting his dollars.
The amount he gets paid, he needs to pull up his socks. Giannis also needs to, change up his game. I mean, we love him when he's Euro stepping to the rim and flashing down those dunks. They're beautiful, but you need that three. This is a new era in the NBA. Cyrus, I read an article by Kevin Garnett the other day. I heard a clip of his interview, an extract of his interview, where he says the current NBA, Cyrus, is such a shooting game that guys who played in the NBA 20, 30 years ago would struggle to play in this league at the moment. The only difference is the hand checks that they were allowed to do back then. But at the moment, Cyrus, the shooting game, he says, people, first of all, would get a lot of their ankles broken. And the amount of shots that would be taken in their face, they would be amazed. And it made me think that the modern day big man, the modern day NBA player in general needs that three ball. He needs to shoot that three ball. And the big piece, lacking from Giannis. He's very much better over the years with his mid-range, but he needs that three ball, Cyrus. We know he can dunk. We know he can shoot from mid-range. We need that 3-point. And I think that's what they're working on. Middleton has stepped up. The squad, I think the whole squad has stepped up.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they need to do, Cyrus, and that will keep them right up there, in the top three. The Brooklyn Nets, Cyrus, from the beginning of the season, we knew putting Kyrie and KD together, that's a killer combo. But guess what? The Brooklyn Nets had a surprise. They served us with a 3-piece, Cyrus. They said, no, not 1 piece, not 2 pieces. We're giving you 3 pieces. 3 former All-Stars. 3 All-Stars, 3 former MVPs.
2 MVPs,
2 MVPs, sorry, and 2 champions. 2 MVPs, 2 champions. 1 in Kyrie. But Cyrus, we've always fancied these guys. I mean, just the way they look, the squad. I mean, they still kept the likes of Joe Harris and that's all. DeAndre Jordan there in the paint. We saw, the Brooklyn Nets are possibly headed for the top.
Do you think that they could overtake the others, or do you think that there's still too much anxiety within that group? Who takes the rock? Who takes the last shot? Do they have enough defense?
Cyrus, first of all, I think the anxiety has been taken over about who holds the rock more. Kevin Durant knows he's a walking bucket. He doesn't need the ball in his hands all the time. So does James Harden. James Harden, although he's been talked about as a ball hog, he knows he doesn't need the ball in his hands. He can catch, step, and shoot. So can KD. Kyrie, I think, is the one who needs the ball in his hands more. He's Uncle Drewing there. And that's what he does. So we give him his props. But Cyrus, if I take it back to your question, are the standings going to stay there? I think those 3 teams, if you ask me, are going to keep renting that spot. It's going to be fluctuating. One for a week or so, the other one goes up top. The other one goes to the second spot. So between the Sixers, the Bucks, and the Nets, I think they're going to be renting that top spot for a while. Who's going to finish on top? If I was a betting man at the moment, I would say it's definitely the Brooklyn Nets, although they need to really sort out their defensive problems. The Boston Celtics, Indiana Pacers, and Charlotte Hornets, Cyrus.
But the Celtics, though.
Cyrus, you always say the Celtics, though. Since they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals back in the days with Kyrie Irving.
Is that not enough? Is that not enough?
But the Celtics, Cyrus, the Celtics are a bunch of youngsters that still need Brad Stevens to coach them to another level. They showed you last season, and they're showing you currently.
That is true. I must say, though, that I do feel the Celtics are potentially a trade away from actually changing the whole complexion of that conference, or even just a Kemba Walker ascension into a better player away from being the team that they should be, because I think that they're almost carrying Kemba, and then the center spot is just one of those they just haven't been able to figure out since getting rid of Aaron Baines. But let's move across to the Western Conference, which is really, really interesting because the Utah Jazz are heading up the West. I don't think anybody would have expected that at the beginning of the season, but it's been incredible to see what they've done, and they're the first team to win 20 games. So you just have to hand it to Quinn Snyder and his team for making sure that this roster that they have currently at the Jazz is doing what it needs to do. With only 5 losses this season, 20 wins, Donovan Mitchell pulling up, he came up big in the win against the Celtics, and that's what you want. You want to see those guys doing stuff, and this is a team that's playing without Mike Conley, who can also offer a lot to them going forward. But much like in the East, is this also going to be a case of the Utah Jazz are renting the spot because your Lakers are just waiting? They're waiting. It's that I've been seeing the Lakers, and there's been a trend, but we'll get to that. What do you think? Do you think that the Jazz might be able to keep on this form, or do you think it's just a nice bit of the season where they'll be like, man, you remember that time we were really good?
No, Cyrus, first of all, I got to give it up to the Jazz. I'm really happy. Not since the times of Malone and Stockton have they been performing at this level. I think maybe the new age Malone and Stockton could be Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. And
I've been hearing people say that is a massive stretch.
Because Rudy Gobert cannot light a candle in Karl Malone's direction, right?
No, he cannot.
But if you look at Donovan Mitchell, though, I think he could talk to John Stockton. I know John Stockton is one of the best point guards we ever had in this league, but he can talk to him and say, yeah, look, I am doing some wonderful things here. But Cyrus, let's talk about the standings, right?
Yeah.
I think the Lakers, if they stop getting themselves into overtime trouble, could potentially take the top spot because they're exhausting themselves. Play all these OT games. But Cyrus, this battle for LA continues, which is the Clippers and the Lakers. And I think the battle for those two in terms of keeping that supremacy is going to be making those first 3 spots very hard to maintain. The Jazz, as much as I like the Jazz, I think they're just on a good run at the moment. Because here, we've also got the Denver Nuggets, Cyrus. You know the Denver. Even their 1-2
Nowhere close to the top 6.
I know they're nowhere close, but they are coming, Cyrus. They're coming, I'm telling you. You cannot tell me that the Utah Jazz are going to stay up there and the Denver Nuggets are going to stay down there and the Phoenix Suns are going to keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
Cyrus, we've always judged the NBA by what happens after the All-Star break, and we haven't hit the All-Star break. So everybody's still out there running and gunning. When reality sets in is when fatigue and the length of the season comes in after the halfway mark. Now, I know it's a shorter season, 4 games, but it's still going to happen, Cyrus, because they even had a shorter break off, especially for those teams that maybe it's supposed to.
And that was going to be my point.
So, Cyrus, I think the Utah Jazz, enough respect, they're playing well. I can't fault them at this moment. But still, I think the powerhouses are still on their way out. And I think, once again, if you were to ask me, Lakers, Clippers, Nuggets, it's going to be like that. By the end of the season, it's like a Clippers Nuggets. So the Jazz can rent that apartment. It's fine. It's well furnished.
They got the penthouse.
Got a view. Let them rent it for a while. It's fine.
I do think, though, and this is the point I was going to make, is that the overtime games have been really, really tough on the Lakers, who actually cannot afford to keep playing LeBron James so many minutes. As much as he's managed to get the team over the line as Anthony Davis has been out, and they've really been sort of scrapping with teams like the Detroit Pistons, I do think that I'm starting to see a little bit of fatigue in LeBron. I mean, he hit a late game 3-pointer in overtime in the game against the Pistons, but he didn't seem to have the same level of energy. He looked like he was absolutely worn out, and that would happen when you played a double overtime in like the game before that. And this is before there's an All-Star break, and he's definitely going to be the leader of Team LeBron. So he doesn't necessarily get nights off, especially with the NBA also trying to push teams to make sure their stars play. So I do think this might actually be something that we'll be talking about in a couple of months' time in terms of, is LeBron working too hard, and should the Lakers be leaning on some of the other guys to start coming up. But to your point, you say that the Jazz are just renting the penthouse for the moment, and I think I agree with you. I just don't necessarily see how they maintain this form. I like Joe Ingles, I like Bogdanovic, but I just don't think that the makeup of that team is such that they'll stay up top, but their defense might be what keeps them there. And when you look at their all around defensive play, they've always been one of the better defending teams in the NBA, and that might be what keeps them in the top three. I don't know about the Nuggets because they've looked really, really bad, and maybe it is just a question of people finding their form. But sometimes that never happens. Some seasons that just never happens. So this could be a Lakers, Clippers, Jazz scenario. But look, we can only hope.
The Jazz did make it far into the postseason last season. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were just sent home by the same Denver Nuggets I'm talking about. But Cyrus, first of all, if I may take it back to the Los Angeles Lakers, I think Coach Frank Vogel needs to have a serious talk with LeBron James, because you got to remember the guy's 36 years old in his 18th season, right, Cyrus? He's playing heavy minutes for a guy that old and for a guy whose legs have got that much mileage. No, Cyrus, let me tell you something.
No, but interestingly, his minutes are down. Career-wise, his minutes are down for the season. But the last few games, he's had to play like 40 minutes.
But the last few games, Cyrus, if you're playing 40 plus minutes, Cyrus, at age 36, and 2 seasons ago, you went down with a hammy. Cyrus, he's fighting with that hammy. At the beginning of this season, you remember, he said himself, I'm going to be cherry-picking games, and I'm going to be, playing here, taking an off day there. But he's, Cyrus, I think LeBron, he's like Kevin Durant, he's like Steph Curry, he's like Klay Thompson, he's like James Harden, he's like you. He's just a pure hooper.
Just a pure winner. A winner.
Not even a pure winner, Cyrus. He's a pure hooper. He just wants to play the game. Regardless of what's happening, he wants to play the game. And then he hasn't cherry-picked a single game, Cyrus. He's played all games since the tip of the season. And at that age, you are flirting with that injury. I hate to be a guy who's the prophet of doom, because that's my favorite team. That's my favorite player right now. But you're flirting with injury at that age. I saw a stat, Cyrus, where he is currently playing more minutes than Ben Simmons, than Jaylen Brown, and a couple of other young players. And I'm like, how can that guy, at that age, in his 18th season, play more minutes?
When you lean on Rambo, this is what you got. It's one of those things, sometimes you got a guy who's just got the machine gun and he's going wild, and that's LeBron James. It also says that the coaching staff don't think that the rest of the team can cover the minutes that they're losing from KD, and they need LeBron to cover that. But I think we've gone hugely off the topic. I do think, though, that the Lakers will definitely rise to the top in the West, and we'll see what happens in the East. We're going to have to leave the show there, Kaunda. It's been awesome as usual. Thank you so much, my brother. And to all of you who've been watching, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. We love to see the subscription numbers going up, and then share this as far and wide as possible, because the NBA needs the love and we need your love too. So thank you very much.